Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. Seth Meyers is the author of the children's book, I'm Not Scared, You're Scared. In case you don't know him, he is the one and only Seth Meyers, the Emmy Award-winning writer and comedian, best known for his work on Late Night with Seth Meyers, and formerly as head writer on Saturday Night Live. He's hoping his children like this book because none of them can stay up late enough to watch his show. Welcome, Seth. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss I'm Not Scared, You're Scared.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is such a joy. And by the way, so great that we have the same editor, Margaret Anastas, who I adore. I'm doing a children's book with her too, so she's the best.
She is so wonderful. And this is the first time I have ever worked with a book editor in any way. And what a delight they are and how helpful they are with their small suggestions that make huge differences.
Totally. I know. I was like, Margaret, I feel like you need your name on my cover. Like you. Yeah. But she's like, no, this is what an editor does. I'm like, okay, great. Perfect. Okay. I'm Not Scared. You're Scared. Your first picture book. Super exciting. It's essentially about a bear with like an anxiety disorder almost, who's like doing everything he can to get past his fears. If I could just show this, my favorite page of this book. Is that okay? Bear stopped to make sure, this is when they're going on their first adventure or trying to. Bear stopped to make sure they had everything they needed. Do I need a bike helmet? Bear asked. No, said Rabbit. Do I need oven mitts? No, said Rabbit. Do I need bear repellent spray? You're a bear, said Rabbit. Oh my gosh, perfect. Hilarious.
Thank you. And I think what a wonderful thing it is to work with an artist who understands that you need to be able to see a can of bear repellent that will read to children. Yeah. That is so, it's amazing, and obviously I don't have to tell you this, but you learn so much about writing picture books from reading picture books. And you can't say a thing that they then can't see.
Yes, absolutely. And the bear repellent spray is perfect. Great illustration. So you do a million things. Why a picture book? Why did you decide to do this?
Well, of the million things I do, my kids aren't engaging with any of it. They cannot stay up late enough to watch my show. They're not particularly interested in my stand-up work yet. But it really is just, I love reading books to them. I love how it's introducing them to the world of reading and what it shows me about their imaginations. And so no small part of it was probably my own ego wanting to jump into the fray and see how I can measure up against the monsters of children's literature that I'm up against. But it was really fun. It was a fun process and a different process. It was completely unique to other writing I'd done. And so there were a lot of reasons, but mostly it's just fun to hold a book that you worked on and be able to read it to your kids.
And so what do they think? Were they tough critics?
They like it a lot. They are tough critics. They were very helpful in the early stages of this book, especially because it is a book about fear. And it's also about how fear isn't always a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you want your kids to be afraid of things that are actually dangerous.
Yep.
And fear can be a guide. And at the same time, though, I didn't want the book to be so scary that kids wouldn't want to read it. And so that was the part they were helpful with early on. I would tell them the story before I wrote it all down. And they were great there. Now, sadly, their favorite part of the book is the dedication page where I dedicated it to them. They just like pointing out their names to people. I guess they inherited their ego from me.
So you're smart. I dedicated my book that's coming out just to one of my 4 kids. And I was,
oh my gosh.
I know, it was such a mom mistake. I'm like mortified, but it was kind of based on her. So now they've made me promise. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get 4 books out of this.
I mean, I don't want to flex here, but I was so the opposite of you. We had a baby coming. We had a baby on the way. And Margaret was asking me for my dedication. And I wanted to wait until our baby girl was born before because I was like, this will come back to haunt me. I don't want some teenage girl yelling at me, on the eve of her bat mitzvah, how I ruined everything by not,
Yeah, you're much smarter than I was. Lesson learned. Congratulations on your baby, by the way. So exciting.
Thank you.
I read somewhere that your second baby was born in your lobby. Is that true?
Yes. I actually did a Netflix special called Lobby Baby, and it is really fun because if I'm walking in the park, every now and then a person will point at my kid and say, "Is that Lobby Baby?" And he's very proud of the fact that he was born in the lobby. And so are the doormen. They have a special level of ownership over him that I feel like they don't have on the other kids.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I didn't realize Lobby Baby was based on the baby in the lobby.
That would have been a huge coincidence.
I'm sorry. I didn't even, okay.
Yeah, I did a special called Lobby Baby, and then the most amazing thing happened.
I know. Okay, I'm so sorry. This is when you don't prepare enough and don't watch the special. But anyway.
I know. The fact that you can prepare it all with 4 kids, like, God bless. You've got the book title right, and that's all that matters.
Actually, I thought it was great. On your Instagram, you often highlight books that you love, which is wonderful.
Yes.
You must be a huge reader. I'm a huge reader. And you had this one when you were talking about All the Light You Cannot See, I think Anthony Doerr's book, which was so good. And you said, if you've never read this book, now is a great time, not just because it's wonderful, but because there are a lot of short chapters. So if you're a parent thinking, how the hell am I supposed to read a book with everything else going on? Just know if you can find 10 minutes, you're banging out a chapter, maybe 2, depending on how fast a reader you are. But really, it's wonderful. And remember, most local bookstores will deliver and they need your business now more than ever.
Yes. In the early days of the pandemic, especially, I took it upon myself to recommend as many books as I could. And, I hosted the PEN America Awards last night. And one of the things I talked about was how it was such a good, the last 2 years really, I think, showed everybody the value of books and how nice it was in a time where we were so separated from other human beings to remember that a lot of human beings had poured themselves into the pages of these books, and you could feel the human connection even if you were just sitting alone and reading them. It's
so true. I feel like, by the way, you're hosting every event I'm going to in the next couple of months for every literary anything. I'm like, Seth Meyers here, he's everywhere. It's crazy.
I think once they smelled blood in the water. Once they realized I had a book coming out, I mean, they just went. I'm very, very bad at saying no, but I do enjoy. Last night was a wonderful event, and I know I do have one coming up in March as well. Is it Poets and something?
Poets and Writers.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that as well. I'm glad to be there.
So what types of books are you reading now? Like, what have you read lately that's great? Or
the last thing I read that I loved, and I've done this before, when a film or television adaptation is coming out about a book that I haven't read, I realize if I don't read it now, I'll just cave and watch the TV show and then never read it. And so I read Station 11, which had been recommended to me a fair bit during the pandemic, but I don't know if you've read it. It's about a pandemic. And so the pitch was, this was written before COVID, but it's a really good, and I just thought, I can't do it. I can't read it. And then it turned out to be the kind of book that everybody said it was, which was incredibly hopeful and optimistic, despite the fact that it happened during a pandemic. And so knowing that the HBO adaptation was coming out, I read that, and it was just wonderful. And then I got her new book. I don't know how new it is, The Glass Hotel, which is next on the list.
I have been hearing from everybody about Station 11. I have to read this book. You're like the 20th person lately. I have to.
Yeah, it's funny, like how I've had books recommended to me over the years that I haven't liked, but it's very rare that I've had a book recommended by 20 people that I have then not liked. And I don't know why I fight those sometimes the hardest, as if I'm so unique. It's like, no, you all like it, but you don't get me.
Oh my gosh, it's funny. Well, when you were talking about, I think, Celeste Ng's book or something, yeah, I think it was that one. And Instagram also, you said, for those of you who want to like lord it over everybody else, that you've read it before it comes out, you have 5 days.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that nothing's more fun when a TV show's out and people are talking about it to say, yeah, the book did it a little differently. I mean, what are we reading for if not to lord it over the TV people?
Totally. Yeah. We should just keep running lists of hurry up and read these movies.
Yeah, there should be. I think it's really important. This shows a real snobbery. You want to buy a book before it has the mention of the movie or the film on the cover. You know how where it's like soon to be an upcoming major motion picture.
Yep.
You gotta buy the version before that.
Yeah.
You gotta show people you were present at creation.
If you could get the galley, you would just win everything.
The galley.
I mean,
see, these are the sort of
Holy
things
Grail.
now that you and I are, published children's authors, we know all the terms. I will say I'm talking about my book, the thing that's the hardest for me still to say. And again, it's what Margaret calls it. So I always have to stress to people, this isn't a word I chose to use, which is manuscript. It's just very funny when you write a picture book to call, I don't, manuscript just seems like a heavier piece of writing than what I did.
Yeah, my 13 words on a page or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Is a heavy-duty manuscript. So I was reading about, you had mentioned jokingly a bat mitzvah coming up or something. And I wanted to know a little more about, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want, but your wife's Holocaust history is, because I'm really interested in all of that.
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I only regret that I wasn't lucky enough to meet her grandparents. They had both passed when I first met her, which is almost 15 years ago now, I think. But yeah, both of her grandparents, on her mother's side, were Holocaust survivors. Her grandfather was briefly a Schindler Jew who worked in one of his factories. And they met at a refugee camp after the war and just connected there. And then lived this really full life as survivors. It was always a huge part of their life, but they lived in Boston and then they found their way to New Mexico, which is where both of their daughters and son had relocated. And we're just a part of this really vibrant Jewish community there. And when I go to New Mexico, it's amazing how many lives they touched. And yeah, it's really special. And I grew up with everyone assuming that I'm Jewish which I never blame them because it's a very Jewish name. And I do have a great-great-grandfather on my father's side, but I have a real appreciation for it and a real enthusiasm for the fact that we're going to, raise our kids as Jewish because it's obviously meant so much to, my wife's entire family history.
Wow. All these stories of people finding each other in refugee camps, it's always so unlikely. Yeah. It's so unlikely that anyone finds each other, that we are all even here, that it just blows my mind constantly. So
the other crazy thing is how, and I won't get the details of these stories right, but over the years, just because of doing research, they've found cousins because, second cousins all of a sudden become like, twin brothers when you've lost everyone.
Right.
Like any family becomes deeply close. And so they have this very wide net of family that they've met over the years just from doing digging and going through genealogy and going through old papers. And I find that to be an incredible celebration of family when, obviously I love my family very dearly, but I never had to go and find them. Mm-hmm. And they have so many people in their lives that they put the work in as adults to go and find and now have these deeply close relationships too. So it's really a cool thing to be a part of.
Wow. There's some I wish I'd never found.
Exactly. Or some I could, lose somewhere.
Some I could lose, yeah.
Just take them and say we're going to go upstate to go apple picking and then just wait for them to get out of the car and drive back to the city.
Take up strangers, put somebody else in who might want to ride to the city or something. Amazing. And you're doing an event with Judy Blume, who's like a total icon in the space. Are you excited for that?
I am. I was lucky enough to have her on this show once, and that was a thrill in its own right. I think Judy Blume was the first author where I appreciated they could write more than one book. Mm-hmm. And there were more Judy Blume books. As a kid, I remember loving them, and I think there was a book called Super Fudge, which was maybe is that a sequel to Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing? I'm trying to get I know they're connected somehow, but I remember the idea that there was a second book with the same characters was so exciting when, whatever age librarian told me that. And what a lovely, again, as a kid, and I'm really close to my parents and I'm really close to my brother and I love doing things with all of them, but that solitary experience of reading, I found such solace in. And I just remember like, oh yeah, you were one of the first people I hung out with, Judy Blume. Just me, you, and your book.
Were you a big reader as a kid?
I was a big reader as a kid. And by the way, I'm so happy I did this, especially since you've read back a few of my Instagram posts verbatim. But when I was posting about doing this event with Judy Blume. I had so many terrible first drafts that were along the lines of, "Are you there, God? It's me, Seth. Thanks for making my dreams come true and having Judy."
That's funny though. You should.
Yeah, no, right. It's fine, but I would not have enjoyed you being like, "I'm going to read you your Judy Blume." I wasn't really a big reader as a kid. I loved to read, and I felt a great sense of accomplishment whenever I finished a book. And I had my mom really loves literature. She loves books. She loves novels. And so she would suggest them every now and then. My dad loved spy novels and police novels. And so I would sort of swing back and forth between, the kind of books that my mom loved reading, and then, Ed McBain and Robert Ludlum, and I read a ton of James Bond books. So it was a very wide breadth of tastes I had as a kid, and a lot of hours spent.
And did you ever write?
I wrote a ton. I wrote a lot of short stories. I would say that I wrote my way into college. I didn't have great grades, but I was a really good writer as a high school student. This was something that teachers would tell me often, is that I was
I'll take their word for it.
Yeah, I was not. I was a lot of like, "You're not applying yourself, and you're a good writer. You should try harder." And so, but when the chips were down, I could write my way out of trouble more often than not, which then came in very handy at a job like SNL, which is basically like, there's always a deadline, and it's sort of a procrastinator's dream. And so my whole life had been like working late because I'd put it off, and sort of SNL the week starts and it's already too late. So I was sort of ready for the moment.
It's always great when you can find the exact right thing for
that's it.
Your work style and everything. That's amazing. You've interviewed like a bazillion people, obviously. What do you like? What is it about interviewing? What do you get excited about when somebody comes on the show? Like, tell me about that. How do you think about your interviews ahead of time? Like, what do you love? What's exciting?
It's, I think the longer you do it, the more you realize there are 1,000 different kinds of guests. And the great part about the repetition of interviewing them is trying to recognize as fast as possible in the body of the interview what kind they are. Mm-hmm. Do they need your help to sort of walk them along the way to their anecdote? Do they just want you to ask a question and get out of the way for their one-person show? Do they want to basically do an improv scene with you where they don't have a plan? And so I think the thing I look forward to the most as far as interviews is not over-planning it, not building too much of a blueprint for where I wanted to go, and trying really hard to be in the moment, and ultimately, having great appreciation for a talent department who only sits me down with people I'm interested to talk to. Like we try very hard to avoid people where the main thrust of my energy is politeness. Just be nice to them. So it's better to respect them and then have the kindness come from that, as opposed to, I know you don't agree with this person or are interested or respect what they do, but just be polite. So that I never have to fall into, which is great.
So what type of interviewee do you think you are?
Like when I get interviewed, I think I match the energy of the interviewer. Does that sound? I don't know. I think I try to. That's such a good question, and look at how you've thrown me. I feel like I'm pretty fluid. I think I work way too hard when I'm giving answers to not fall into my worst verbal tics. I'm trying very hard not to say and I'm trying very hard not to say the word like, which I overuse.
Okay.
So for those of you listening, now I would like you to go back, listen for ums and likes, and then give it a number, -2 for every -1 for every like. Start at 100.
I'll send you a copy of the transcript and I'll circle any that come.
Thank you.
In red.
This is a true story. When I did my stand-up special, Lobby Baby, which was a year before,
which I will now go.
Lobby.
I will now go and watch. Thank you very much.
It's in the first 15 minutes. Okay, all the Lobby Baby stuff is right off the top. I know you're busy.
I'll watch it.
I think you can even watch it at 1.5 speed on Netflix. I'll give you that. I zip right through. So, but I had someone do a transcript of, I would do practice shows getting ready for the special. And so I would do an hour and I would have someone do a transcription of it and I would go through it and circle the ums. And just that was the way to remind myself it was a problem. Like to I visually see it.
Yeah.
And look and say, look at that. You got to clean that up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty good.
Well, I haven't noticed too many. So I feel like
Thank you.
We have like a check plus,
Good. There's someone right. There's a checker right off screen.
Checker. It would be cool if there was some way to sort of as a word comes out, block it from like the,
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, what I'm talking about.
I know a lot of people are listening and not everybody's watching, but I do want to comment on your bookshelves, which I think are really nicely done.
Thank you.
They're far enough away that you're not distracted by the titles of the book, right? I think that's one of the things we learned in the pandemic era is if the books are too close to the person, you then start reading the backs of their books. But I also want to note, it looks to me as though you've color-coded your books.
I have.
Is that your choice?
It was.
Okay.
It was. I had COVID last February and I was in bed for 9 days and I was only like in this room and my bedroom and couldn't see anybody else and started going out of my mind. And I came in here once I finally wasn't dizzy anymore and whatever. And I took every book off the shelves. I put them all over the carpet, and over the next day or two or whatever, I started color coding. I put them in piles and I started with one shelf and I was like, well, that looks good. And I just kept going. And now no one's allowed to touch these shelves. Like my son came in the other day. He's like, I need a yellow book for some project. And I was like, don't touch it.
Oh, this is fascinating to me. I assume anyone who does that has always done that, but you came to this very, very late. It took COVID for you to get color coordinated.
Well, I had little stacks of color, but it wasn't this. It wasn't the whole thing. And I know it's controversial and some people are like, oh, whatever. My books are alphabetized, but I love it. And I see books now by the spines, right? Like when I'm looking, I'm like, oh, I know that's green or whatever. So
that's very impressive. My wife is very neat, and I was a slob, and I think I'm neater now, but I have not risen to a level of her neatness. But I on my side of the bed, which I should note is against the wall. You have to walk around to my side to look at what's at the foot of my bed. You have to work. You have to work to see that. I really like how 4 books on top of each other looks. I like it on the floor. I like it on a bedside table. I've even moved it to the floor out of respect for the fact that she doesn't like the mess of books. But for me, a good stack of 4, not even a sort of messy stack where it looks like they're all kind of in the process of being read, is maybe my favorite presentation of book. Yeah.
Do they have to be the same, all hardback or anything? Or
I do prefer hardback. I would say that I prefer that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now you can.
Her point is, I don't believe you're reading all 4 of these at any given time, and that's a very fair point and true. But I like to present that way.
I like to be in a bunch of different books at the same time. I think it's different moods, I don't know.
Do you read only fiction or do you read nonfiction too?
No, I read nonfiction too. I love memoir. That's my favorite.
Interesting. Yeah. All right.
Do you read memoir?
I don't read memoir.
Oh, I love it. It's like you're sitting down with someone and hearing their story. You don't care about people's stories. No, I'm kidding. That's all you do.
I mean, I'd read one about me. Does that work? I don't know memoirs enough. Could someone write a memoir about me?
Yeah. No, I mean, fiction is great. Fiction's great too.
Yeah.
Anytime you can get lost and distracted in somebody else's story, it's a nice escape from the craziness of my own life. So there you go.
Good.
Do you have any advice for aspiring authors now that you're a published children's book author?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly cognizant of the fact that it is a different kind of writing than writing a novel or even a short story. But in general, and I think this is the advice that I always give young writers, is you're not a writer until you write. And I think a lot of people think of themselves as writers because they have ideas that they want to get on paper, but it doesn't count until you do it. And the worst thing in the world would be you meet someone who could actually help you as a writer. And they say to you, I'd love to see, give me your favorite thing you've written. And you haven't written it yet. And that happens a lot of time, I should say. And a lot of time when I give this advice, it's to young sketch writers. I always say, don't if somebody says, oh, you want to be a sketch writer? Let me see some of your sketches. And your answer is, let me write them up. They know right then you're just a pretend writer. So, and I think it's really helpful to write it and just write out that first draft. Just get it on paper. And you won't believe the things that parts of your brain that will open up only because you're writing the words on the page. Sometimes you think, I don't have an idea. I don't have enough to start writing. But just that idea of getting words on a page unlocks a different part of your head. And I'm not saying it'll unlock the best part of your head for writing, but more words will come. But you just have to start giving yourself that downward momentum, the gravity of writing, and more will come.
Oh, I love that. The idea of words falling out from gravity.
Well, I always said, I don't know how you feel this way about writing, but this was, again, and so much of my advice is sketch writing advice because that's what I did forever. But sometimes writers would come to me at SNL and say, I have this idea and I can't tell if it works. And I would always say, if you can't think of 2 jokes in the first half hour, it's probably not a good idea. Mm-hmm. Because I think great comedy writing, and maybe all writing, like it should feel like there should be some joy as it's coming out of you onto the page. And if it feels too uphill, you maybe want to reposition your skis and see if there's a way where you can get the wind behind your back.
Yeah, you might just want to go right to après-ski. Get some hot chocolate. Put your feet up.
Classic Hemingway move.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Après-ski. Okay. Amazing. Seth, thank you so much for all of your time. I really appreciate it. Congratulations on I'm Not Scared, You're Scared. And congratulations on everything. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much. It was lovely spending time with you.
You too. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.